Interesting question today. Is it inherently better to be raising pigs on pasture than in a barn or on concrete? I'm Steven from Rowan Ridge Farm, and we're raising pastured pork, heritage hogs, the old fashioned way. And I've been thinking a lot about this question of what is actually the best way to raise pigs. Now, a little housekeeping here. I had broken my phone last week and ran over it with a tractor. I was disking out the wiener pen where I keep all my wiener pigs, and they were in there for a little too long this spring, which kind of ties into what I'm going to talk about today in terms of the best environment and is pastured pork really the best way to go. So they were in that wiener pen for too long of a time, and there was a lot of waste and refuse that was built up there. So I was trying to disc that out with the tractor, and my iPhone fell off the tractor and got run over by the disc. Almost, well, it didn't quite cut it in half, but it cut the screen in half. And so Verizon, who I'm unfortunately working with, Verizon was unable to fix it. And so it took me a few days, but now I'm back on my original device, which is, well, it's a blessing and I'm thankful for that. But before we get into things here today, I wanted to give a special shout out to my friend at Oak Blossom Farms. I linked their channel in the description here, and I'll put it in the comment, or if you want to put it in the comment, if you happen to see this and want to drop it in the comments before I get there. Um, he had a really cool system for sort of assessing breed stock and their performance, because we talked about that, I think, on the last live stream that I did. And basically, it's a three strikes, you're out type of arrangement where the first one is kind of you get a pass. The second litter is going to be hit or miss. It calls it second litter syndrome, or SLS. And then the third litter is really the make or break. And that is the one that determines kind of, and if you think about it, that determines whether they go to the freezer or whether they are on the team as a permanent member. And that makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because with three farrowings, that gives you some opportunity to have some trending data and to be able to actually look and say, okay, what is the performance of this animal going to be? So always appreciate those comments, and hope to hear from more of you guys and check out his channel. He's raising old spots on pasture and doing a fantastic job. One of the things that got me thinking about this today in terms of, is pastured pork the best way to raise animals? Anybody who has, hey, Timmy VR, how are you doing? Good to see you on the live stream this afternoon. Anybody who's looked at anything about farming on YouTube probably has run across Joel Salatin. Hey, Duke. If you've been studying up on farming, you probably read some Joel Salatin books. And Joel Salatin is a very eloquent speaker and puts a really good homespun wisdom on the concept of farming. And a lot of people want to get into farming these days, which is the reason why I wound up here. Maybe that's why some of you guys are here. And welcome to all the new folks that just joined the stream here. We're talking a little bit about raising pigs on pasture and why that may or may not be the best arrangement. And those of you guys that are here, Duke, thank you. I appreciate that you love my videos. That means a lot. We're always looking to get more folks subscribed to the channel because we want to make America farmers again. And that starts with you guys, even if you're not out there actually raising livestock yourself. Participating in farming and being aware of what's going on in farming is a big part of this process. So Joel Salatin has a lot of really great videos and books, and he kind of romanticizes the image of the pig on pasture. And I'm all for that. One of the most beautiful, most satisfying things, I've said it before and I'll say it again, is when you look out your kitchen window and you see a mama with her babies and the little piglets running through the pasture on green grass. It's a beautiful, beautiful sight. And it's one of the most satisfying things because as a farmer, it makes you feel like I'm really doing something right. This is like the idyllic scene from the butter box that you see in the grocery store. Now, one of the things that makes it difficult to do that, though, is you have to not only live with that one snapshot of the pig on the pasture, you also has to live you have to live with the other excuse me, the other several months out of the year, more months in many cases, where you have to figure out how to keep your animals dry and healthy, and how to also at the same time manage your pasture in a way where the pasture is green. Because if you just have a bunch of pigs going onto the pasture, that pasture will not be green for very long. It gets stomped down and dug up, and then then it's not really going to be good for much after that. And so you have to kind of balance those competing interests. And here in the Northeast, I am in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is an interesting place because very cold in the winter, we get a lot of snow, and then in the spring, all the snow melts out, and you wind up having a lot of mud for a lot of the spring. And it can take several months sometimes before things dry out enough and your pasture and the forages on the pasture get established enough where they're grown enough and they're big and strong enough to where they can handle a herd of pigs going through there and doing some grazing, and then you can start rotating them through there. And I actually made a short. I'm editing a short, which I'm going to post hopefully in the next 24 hours or so, kind of talking a little bit about just the challenges of pasture management. But it occurred to me in making that short that there's a reason why commercial hog producers do not raise their pigs on pasture, because when you're raising your animals on pasture, you are absolutely at the mercy of the weather and of the elements and of things that are completely beyond your control. I mean, you're able to move the animals off of lower ground, you can shelter them in certain ways, you can help them bed down, but at the end of the day, when your animals are out there in the weather, you're kind of stuck with whatever you can get, and it's not always going to be a good effect. And so I tend to be kind of hard on myself when it comes to raising animals and what I'm doing on the farm. And I think that in some ways, I think it's a mark of somebody who cares and who tries to really do a good job and improve what they're doing, that they tend to be hard on themselves because they always are thinking I could be doing it better, and they always strive to do better and they want to do better. And I don't know if you're still here, Bobby, but how does what work? Maybe give me a follow-up question there in terms of what you're wondering how it's working. I don't know what you're referring to. Um, but always wanting to do better is something that I find myself pushing towards. And this year in particular, the animals have been we have like a sacrifice area, is what we call it. And that is the little part of the pasture that's directly touching the barn. And when everything is wet and there's a lot of mud and there's water down on the pasture, rather than letting the animals go running through there and stomp everything out, we hold them back, keep them by the barn, and let them, they make a mud pit out of the sacrifice area rather than making a mud pit out of the entire pasture. And so you have to kind of hold everybody back. And I was just thinking about how last week I thought that this week I was going to be putting the pigs down on the pasture and everything would be ready to go. But we got 2 days of rain the last couple of days. And then we have another 5 days of rain coming up. And there's no way that I can put 15 pigs down there and strip graze them through at a speed that's going to do anything other than completely demolish everything that I have, and potentially put the pigs at risk and put them in a bad situation where it's going to be both on the cool side and also muddy, and make it hard for them to bed down and get dry somewhere, because I can't bring a round bale down into the pasture when everything is so wet that the tractor is going to sink out of sight. Hi, Duke. Thanks for watching the stream here, boss. I appreciate it. Um, so kind of beating myself up a little bit over the fact that, well, it's raining, and so the sacrifice area just gets muddier and uglier, and I just am chomping at the bit because I want to get the animals out of the barn, out of the sacrifice area. I want to move them up the hill into the woods. I want to move them down the hill onto the pasture and get things kind of disturbed a little bit. I don't want to get it stomped to smithereens. I want to get it a little bit disturbed so that I can plant it and then really get some better forage growing in there for the summer and even into the fall. And that will be our pastured season. And I'm very new to doing the pasture. I'm trying to figure a lot of that stuff out. And it's just it's funny to me how pastured pork is this big thing where everybody wants to do it, and it's like this buzzword like organic, and I'm all for it. I love it, but at the same time, there are instances where having your animals on the pasture is going to be detrimental to their health, detrimental to your mental health, detrimental to your profit and ability to actually make the pasture work. And you need to have them on concrete. Like having pigs on concrete, that should not be a dirty word or a perverse concept in the lexicon of farmers, because there are some times when getting them up on some sort of, and maybe concrete isn't like the end all be all substance. I understand the permanent housing structures or have their drawbacks, but being able to have a idiot proof, well drained, firm, dry piece of material for them to reside on when weather and pasture are not in good condition, it makes a real big difference. And if you have that, you'll be happy that you did, even though it sucks seeing everything float by the barn. And you got to wonder when you're going to be able to get everybody down to the pasture and get things situated. Take care, Duke. Thanks for tuning in, boss. Um, but at the same time, you're happy that at least your animals have a dry place to bed down and sleep so that their health isn't going to be compromised. And maybe you're set back a couple of weeks, but you can get them down on the pasture. Now, in terms of the net effects of having pastured pork, this past weekend, I dressed out one of my roaster hogs, who's actually a little bigger than a normal roaster. He was like 185 pounds on the hoof. I dressed out this hog for a pig roast, and this is my first time ever doing a scald and scrape. If you look at some of my posts that I put a picture with something to the effect of "Never ever again am I ever going to do this." And so this is the first time I ever scalded and scraped a hog. Now I've butchered them before. Hey Duke, take care, and we'll look forward to seeing you. Definitely come back. We enjoy having you here, and bring some questions next time. I like to get some feedback here too. I appreciate you tuning in. um, I had kind of stuck my neck out and committed and said, okay, one of my friends, they were going to be doing a pig roast. And they said, do you have anything? I had a pig that I needed to get rid of, and he was about the right size. And I said, yeah, I mean, how bad could it be? Watched a few YouTube videos and I went for it. And the reality is, like, I'm used to, at least in this part of the country, I know like down south and some places out west, I understand that people like to keep the skin on more. It's a little more traditional. There are certain type of curing recipes and charcuterie and stuff that you're doing where having the skin on helps with the cure, like a country ham. I believe there's more than that, but I'm an expert in eating charcuterie. I'm not necessarily an expert at this point in making it. Um, and so I said to myself, how difficult can it be? Well, I found out, and the answer is very difficult. I've always skinned my hogs, as they say in New Hampshire. I don't know if this is beyond New Hampshire. They say scun. I scun the animal. I've always said skinned, but I was also an English major, so I tend to be a little bit of an elitist jerk about that kind of thing. A bit of a grammar Nazi sometimes. I always skin my pigs, and then they go into the cooler, and then you cut them up, and that's it. And I thought that was a lot of work. I thought skinning a hog and kind of doing the normal processing was kind of a lot of work. I thought, we're going to leave the skin on, we're just going to dunk it in the water, scrape the hair off, and done deal. And by the time I got it finished, it was like a whole day process to do the scalding. And I mean, it wasn't a whole day, but I got started late, so for me it was all of my day. And it's just hard work, because the thing is, like, skinning a hog, like, it's challenging in its own way, but you have some flexibility. There's margin of error because there's some fat layer under the skin. And so, maybe you go a little too deep here, a little too deep there, not deep enough, but end of the day, the skin kind of comes off, and it's relatively self-explanatory. Whereas with the fur, or the hair, I should say, and you're scraping everything, you're either getting it all off and it's clean, or like there there's hair on there and it's very obvious, and you can't just say, oh, it's close enough. I mean, I suppose you can, but it felt wrong to do that. So what I wound up doing, a friend of mine loaned me a kind of rudimentary propane burner setup that enabled me to heat up the water to about 160 degrees. And then after doing that, picked it up with the tractor, dunked it in a couple of times, about 5 minutes, scraped everything as much as I could. But what happened was the first round of scraping, you got a decent amount of hair, maybe 40, 50% of the hair came off, especially in certain areas. And I was like, okay, this isn't bad. But then you have the other 40, 50% of the hair that's left on there, and that hair isn't going anywhere. So you try to scrape a little faster, scrape a little harder, and this is not doing anything. It's not really moving the needle. You can pull it out by hand, but that's not really very efficient. And then you scrape a little harder, you put a little more pressure on there, and you're scraping. And then the blade, I was using like a garden hoe, and that goes through the skin, and now all of a sudden you're peeling skin off, which is defeating the entire purpose of what you're trying to do there. So I was really concerned about the idea that this thing was going to be ruined and worthless because I had holes in the skin and the hair wasn't coming off the way I wanted it to. So I got about 75% of the hair off, and then I took out a blowtorch and I used that to kind of burn and then scrape and burn and scrape everything down from there. And to make a long story excruciating, I got that pig to my friend's store where they were doing the pig roast that this past weekend, and I was just hoping that it wouldn't be terrible. Part of me kind of hoped that it would be awful so that I wouldn't ever have to be asked to provide another roaster. But as it turned out, the fellow who cooked the roaster, he did a fantastic job. That's actually the guy who is pictured in the video that I posted, the short that I posted about the beginner's luck on the first roaster. That wasn't me. That's actually the guy who's cooking it, and everybody was blown away. They were super impressed, and I was humbled to hear that everybody really liked it that much, and that people who are used to eating farm fresh pork thought that this was exceptionally better than other farm fresh pork, not just better than Walmart pork, but like they were really impressed with it. And I was kind of like, oh geez, like how did I do that? And so that kind of got me thinking about back to the whole thing with where we started here with pastured pork. Is it better? Well, I think if you can make it through the hard parts, yeah, it is better. It's a better product in the long run. How much better, and is that amount better? Is it worth it? Then that's something that everybody has to determine for themselves. Hey, Duke, welcome back. Glad you could make it back in here. Um, the question is like, can you hold on through the times when you got to do the best you can to get by and it's real ugly? You know, it's like Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going. Don't stop. You got to keep going because you got to get through that to the next side. And there's certain times of the year when farming is just butt ugly and very discouraging and depressing because you want to see your animals, clean. You don't want to see them covered in mud. You want to have fresh forage and pasture for them to be on. You don't want them, you know, living right near piles of their own excrement because they can't spread out and rotate around the pasture and they're stuck in a barn, and you have to make do with the best that you have in that situation. And sometimes you have to take the good with the bad. And that's why I'm trying to get people to subscribe to this channel, and I'm trying to encourage people to think about what they're doing and how they can participate in farming, whether that's as a consumer, because everybody's got to eat, whether that's just taking that first step and saying, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and buy those chickens, or I'm going to, get that tomato plant and put it in a Home Depot bucket on the balcony, or to do something to really take an active role in making America farmers again, because I think it's a really important thing. But to develop that mental fortitude to deal with the fact that, and there's always points like this, at least in my limited experience, I've encountered a lot of points like this where it's like, I want to throw my hands up and say, this is done deal. Like, this is not gonna, there's nowhere to go from here. But if you just kind of sleep on it, be patient, and kind of deal with the ugly farming, because sometimes farming is ugly, and let it be ugly. And just as long as it keeps going, keep it going. And then at some point, the rain goes away, the mud kind of dries out, the animals get out of the barn, the forages come up, and then a couple months later, or even a couple of days later, you turn around and look at it, and it's like you see mama and the babies running through the field and the forage and the pasture eating the grass. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's right. That's why I'm doing this. Like, this actually does matter and it is better. Now, if I were tasked with producing a massive amount of pork, hey, Eric from South Alabama, how's the weather down there? I watch Rob. I was always calling him Chris for some reason from Dowdle Family Farms. I love his videos, and I always wonder, what things he would have to tell me and wisdom he might have to impart to me up here in New England, trying to scrape pigs off of the rocks up here, and it's still like wet and rocky and muddy, and it's a very unpleasant and agriculturally uh, undesirable mix of characteristics that we have up here. But we're still waiting, and it was almost all dried out. It was beautiful. I was like just about ready to send the pigs down the hill. It was going to be great, and then the rain came, and it's going to keep coming. And on top of that, when it rains, it pours, figuratively speaking, because I need to get feed for the hogs. And the way I bring the feed in, I bring it in on an open trailer. So I kind of try not to haul feed when it's wet. If it's wet, then I don't want to do it, because then when I put it back into different containers in the barn, then it gets moldy, and it's going to be raining like through next weekend. So I'm going to have to wait until next week, and I'm going to have to keep buying like Tractor Supply stuff just to kind of nickel and dime us through before I can get a big order from my feed supplier, who's a couple hours away. And so I'm going to be paying out the butt. It's in the 80s in South Alabama. Is it dry though? That's kind of the big thing, because the humidity, like when it's dry, I feel very lucky to be living in the Northeast, because we don't typically get monsoon type of rains, but sometimes in the spring we get these weird ones where it comes through and it just washes everything out. And hey, Duke, thanks for subscribing. Anybody else who's watching, if you're not subscribed, I'd love it if you would, because we can do more of these videos and you can see some of my other stuff. This channel is quite new. I have only started making videos on this channel. I'm trying to get folks to subscribe because I have a special challenge that I'm going to be announcing, project maybe we could call it, that I'm going to be doing, and it's something that you guys can participate in with me. Once I get to 100 subscribers, and I was at 96 when last I looked, maybe 97 with Duke. Um, but um, I've kind of gotten backlogged. I have 4 videos that I'm trying to make right now, when my phone got run over and that whole thing set me back. So I kind of ran out of it kind of threw me off of my rhythm. So I haven't put anything out, any long form videos out for about 3 weeks. And I like doing the long form videos. I like watching long form videos. I like the live videos just because it's easy for me to do these, and I like being able to have conversations. And Eric says you got rain down there for the next 3 days, and I bet Alabama rain is, in all fairness, is probably going to be a lot worse than New Hampshire rain. I actually used to live in Fitzgerald, Georgia. I don't know if you know where that is, not too far from Macon. And boy, we used to get some real frog stranglers down there. And up here we get heavy rain, but not that much rain, that heavy, that consistently. But it's hard on the animals and trying to keep everybody dry. But anyhow, yeah, I kind of got behind in the queue with making videos and stuff, and I'm looking forward to being able to do more of that here. But time ebbs and flows, because I'm working here at the hospital. It's, well, almost 5:15, and I got to go home and do the chores, because when the feeding area is a literal mud pit, it's not nearly as bad as it was a couple of months ago in the spring, when the snow melt really had everything bogged down. Right now, it's, like, right about over my ankles, so it's enough that if you're moving too quickly without thinking, it'll take your boot from you, so you gotta watch out for that, and then, you know, you take your boot stays and your foot comes up, and then you put your sock down in the mud, and that's a good life lesson to remember not to be hasty, and then but as long as it doesn't get any deeper and it dries out a little bit more, it won't be terrible. I just like to, and I don't mean to bag on Joel Salatin because I've listened to a lot of his books. I have a couple of his audiobooks. I've watched his videos. I'm a big believer in his message. I just always like to put a little real world seasoning and flavor of balance on things to say, well, this is what it's actually like. And the thing I aspire to is those moments with the pigs on the pasture, with living their best pig lives and the pigness of pigs and all of that great stuff. I'm all in for that. But there are some times when it's like my pigs have been in the frickin' barn since December, and I really want to get them out of the sacrifice area because they're just stomping their turds into the rocks at this point in the year. And it's like would be nice to get them up into the forest or get them down onto the pasture and be able to move them and do that in a way where they're not going to be too cold and wet all at the same time. Cold, I don't mind. Wet, I don't even necessarily mind. Cold and wet together. And also with forage that's not properly established, it's like, what are you gonna do? Like you kind of, you know, it's a non-starter. You're kind of stuck. And that's the frustrating thing that makes me think like if I was just doing this the conventional way, which obviously I would not be doing this the conventional way because a conventional hog barn, I don't know if any of you guys know off the top of your head the cost of a one of those big 10,000 sow or 10,000 hog units that they have like out in the Midwest, probably well above my price range. But um I couldn't, I wouldn't be dealing with this if I were out there. Everything would be very straightforward. So there's always a trade-off. I guess that's kind of my bottom line. There's always a trade-off no matter how you're raising your animals. You have to choose what's going to fit best for your environment. There are some people in some places where the climate and the environment is such where you can raise your pigs on pasture year round or almost year round. There are even some years since I've been here where I've been able to have my hogs on pasture for the better part of the year. And then there's years like this where they kind of went into the barn in November actually, because it was like middle of November when we got our first heavy snowfall. And it was shortly after that I rounded everybody up to the barn for the winter. And then you hope that they can come out soon, but then depending on, mud and forage establishment, you may not be able to get them out of the barn as quickly as you like. And so there's general principles and general ideas that we aim for. You kind of shoot for the moon and hit the barn, but whatever it is that you're doing, the values that you are holding to, you have to find a way to enforce them or to execute them in a way that matches your money, your time, your, just resources generally, your animals, and your climate, your situation, your topography, what does the land look like? There's a lot of things where I watch, I go back to Rob from Dowdle Family Farms. I watch their videos with just tremendous, and I can't tell you how envious I am watching Rob's videos. And they have these big stretches of pasture that are out there, and everything is like flat. And I'm like, oh man, that must be so nice driving a tractor on that. And my property is it's just like washboards and basins and dishes. It's only 10 acres, but there's nowhere flat on the entire property, with the exception of like where my house sits on, the garage floor. That's the only flat part on my property. So you kind of have to do the best you can with what you have, and recognize that the ideal is the ideal for a reason, but it is only an ideal. And ultimately you got to get as close to that as you reasonably can, but not beat yourself up over it too much. And so that's kind of my thought process with that stuff. So it's been about 30 minutes. I'm winding down towards the end of this particular rant. Um, I would love it if you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Presumably, the one person who is still here watching, the zero person. So I'll just talk to whoever's watching this after the live stream. If you've made it this far and you're not subscribed, you're literally one in a million. But love to have subscribers, comments. Comments are really the biggest thing too, because I like to hear what other people are thinking and like what brought them here. You know, why are you here? Why are you watching this? I mean, I can tell you why I'm here talking and why I'm doing this, but like I want to know about you. What is it that you're doing and what is your interest level in pigs on pasture? Where are you in that equation? Where are you with pigs on pasture? I want to know what about pasture pork is interesting to you. Um, Let me know, because that's kind of the point of why we're making these videos. And I typically do live streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, when I have a little bit of extra time. I have a short that I'm going to be putting out, and then I have like 5 long videos that are in the process right now, backlogged because I broke my phone and all that jazz. But we're getting caught up. We're getting caught up, and that's kind of what we're going to be doing for 2025 is just getting caught up, because been pretty behind, but it's good, and it's worth it to do this. So on that note, I think I'm going to conclude this live stream. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch and to listen and to drop your comments, to subscribe, and to make America farmers again, participate in your food system, even if it's a small thing like growing a tomato plant in your, outside your garage or on your balcony, doing little things like that, and finding farmers in your community that you can buy from directly and establish a direct relationship with people who are producing food and that are doing it, relatively speaking, the old fashioned way, who aren't just, working for one of the vertically integrated massive food corporations that control 80 to 90% of the meat industry, but rather the people who are out there dealing with the bureaucracy, the red tape, and the nonsense that our ever-loving government has provided us with for our safety, and to make sure that we don't get hurt and we don't buy any illegal meat from any disreputable farmers. No, connect with those farmers and see what you can do to support them, to participate in what they're doing, to volunteer for them. And, if you're interested in growing your own stuff, start with the people in your community who are already doing it, because you can learn a lot about what to do and what not to do right there. And I'm going to leave you guys with that little free bit of information and knowledge. I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video, and I hope you all have